Hours and hours of endless debate fills the conversations of fans surrounding the hypothetical and totally theoretical boundaries of their respective fandoms. And despite having a tight game system to negate many of those arguments, Magic is no different. So, after many a year playing this game, what arbitrary nonsense are we still musing over? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Bam.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And today we are going to be doing something which we haven't done since episode 21, and that is talk about hypotheticals. We're basically just going to be talking absolute shit and nonsense today, because this is the first week back after the UK 1 month lockdown that we've recently had, and Nathan and I have been working our asses off trying to recoup some money, and it's just been all go, and it's been very jarring going from a month of doing nothing into a week of working solidly, right?
Yeah, Christmas time has hit and there was very little time to prepare for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, you know what, we waffle and we do hypotheticals almost every episode because that's just two Magic nerds talking about Magic. But I really loved some of our earlier episodes where we were still trying to find out where we wanted this podcast to go and what we wanted to do. And some of the episodes were just us literally going, oh, who would win in a fight? This person or this person? Although, actually, no, I say that. When we last did this, I came up with questions because we're both coming up with questions. I came up with questions like, oh, what plane in the multiverse has the best pubs to go to? And then you brought out questions like, which creature type has the most existential existence, or who's in the most pain as a creature? And I'm you went really dark with it, really weird.
Is this why I wasn't allowed to make up any questions for the episode?
Well, no, I think because we did this so last minute, I was like, oh, do you know what? I'll just pull out some questions. It's only if you haven't, as a listener at home, if you've not listened to some of our early episodes, specifically episode 21, do go listen to it, because it's a real little look into Nathan's psyche and how he looks at Magic.
Hey, no, I've got many sides for myself. Okay, that was just one flex that week. I might have to go and look back in the diary and see what was happening. Maybe things weren't going so well for Cancel that week.
Yeah, maybe you're having a bad week and you were like, oh, which goblin deserves to die the most? You know.
Oh no, bless the goblins. No goblin deserves death. They find it themselves naturally. It's just
that's
their biology.
They're Magic's little fireworks, aren't they? So what I've done is I've got 4 questions here. 2 of them are ones where I did Twitter polls, because hypotheticals and kind of multiple choice, who does this best, or where would you rather go, is something that we put out on our Twitter quite a lot, because it's kind of fun just to see people's opinions on this kind of stuff, and because we don't often wrap whole podcast episodes around these kinds of questions. So 2 of them are from our Twitter, because I actually want to see what you specifically think about it, and maybe even if you answered on the Twitter poll, Nathan, because it's me that usually forces these things on people. Even if you voted on them, I wonder if your answer is still the same. And then we have one mystery question, and then a question from one of our regular listeners and interactors. So there's only 4 questions. We're just gonna have a chill old time. Before we start, I want to do a quick shout out. I received a very special mail day yesterday, which you were in on, because it was a friend of mine from an old work that I used to do at Z Events, which was an immersive zombie event I used to work at. And it was a dude there called John, who me and a few of the others taught how to play Magic, along with a couple of other people, so we could have people to play with Magic at work, because as if our job wasn't busy enough at the time. And I haven't spoken to him in a couple of years. And then he messaged my wife, Holly, who then messaged you to make sure it was all going to work, because it was about John wanting to send me a couple of cards as kind of oh, hey, I remember when you guys used to sort of play Magic and you guys taught me. And he discovered this podcast, Magic the Flavouring, by accident, because he didn't know that I was doing this podcast, and he was rifling through all the podcasts on Spotify, and he found our podcast on a whim, started playing it, heard my voice and your voice coming out of the speakers, and was like, oh, this dude played Magic with me 3 or 4 years ago. And he sent me a couple of cards. He sent me etched foils of Helana and Elena, and he sent me an etched foil Queen Marchesa, because those are the cards that we were talking about last time we were talking about Commander Legends. And I had no idea, and I was very grateful. But you knew about it. Holly was checking with you that I didn't already have those cards, right?
Yeah, well, I knew about the Helana and Elena, and I'm glad that, because I thought originally it was just Holly who was being utterly, amazingly perfect in her choice. Because I mean, I think those two are probably the best two choices out of the set for you in terms of like something that you would look at and have affinity with. I was then the thing is I was then tempted to then try and be like, oh, okay, that's a really good idea. Because I was thinking about maybe getting you a Marchesa myself, and I'm glad I never did, because I didn't know that was within the 3 that he was going to get you, and now I know he has. Thank God that I didn't and double up.
Yeah,
but
sure.
there was very some duplicity going on behind the scenes, which is quite funny and quite amusing to be a part of.
I mean, it was very sweet. I'm just absolutely blown away. Like, obviously, it's nice. It's nice to know that someone who is like a friendly face found our podcast. It's very nice to know that they found it without necessarily me trying to ram it down, like, you know, social media's throats, like my personal sort of like Facebook or whatever. Because I don't talk about it on personal Facebook because, quite frankly, I don't think my aunts and uncles need to hear about my nerd podcast too often. So it's kind of nice that he found it organically. That was kind of a cool twist of fate. And yeah, it's just really cool to know that not only has he kept the game up, but that this is a game which, you know, years of time can separate people, and yet this game can still bring people together and, you know, remind people of like cool memories that they shared. And like the company that we worked for doesn't even really exist anymore. Like, it's changed its event structure entirely and it's moved to a different country. So it was just really sweet, really touching. And yeah, John, if you're listening, thank you very much, mate. Cheers for that.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to see like when you have friends that you will play with, and then you don't necessarily see them for years, and then they come back and then they've kind of like they've graduated into their own. It's no longer that, oh, okay, like they play like life game cards or whatever. They just rack up with a Send triplet CDH deck, and you're like, what did I create here?
All right, let's get into it. Let's get into some hypothetical content. So, question number 1. I'm just going to dive straight into it. Have you prepared answers for these, or have you only just looked at the questions?
No. I've got my definitive answer, and then I've got some thoughts as to why I came to it.
All right, cool. All right, these the first couple are multiple choice. So here we go. So what multiverse trial system would your fantasy self fare best in? And the options I gave you were the Eldraine Court Trials, the Amonkhet God Trials, the Kaladesh Inventors Fair, the Kylum Valor's Reach competition, so Battle Bond, and then the last one, which wasn't on the initial Twitter question all that time ago, was the Dominarian Cabal Pit Fights. So if it was you, and how you would imagine like your fantasy self to be, because I think it would be a little bit lame and self-esteem issues abound if we were to transport ourselves into Magic the Gathering world. We would just be us, like literally just us. Like we wouldn't have any powers or be part of any like guild or anything like that. So if you were to kind of like have your honest fantasy self, what would you fare best in? What do you think?
So I ended up saying the Valor's Reach competition.
Mostly, oh my God, really?
Right, so this is what. Right, so there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, I think initially when this poll came out, I selected Kaladesh Inventors Fair because I liked the idea of this expo of where you the thing is, I'm not technologically minded. Like, bless my mum, she was a bit of a technophobe and still is, and so I grew up as being a bit of a technophobe and still fumble through basic Excel functions. So if that's already difficult for me, I doubt I'm going to be able to craft ether into some kind of like Colossus or something. Like, I don't think I can make any of the things that, like, as much as I think those probably that appeals to me the most. Like, I've done a fair bit of like self-canon like fan fiction over the years. I've got some degree of writing ability, and obviously being Fox related, I've always thought of myself as, if I was to come from anywhere, I'd be a Kitsune, a Kamigawan like illusion mage. So it's the same kind of way that Jace kind of convinces people of illusions, but instead it kind of turns other people's what they see into something else. So it's more like a holodeck for other people, like you kind of form a holodeck around other people. So so with that in mind, I thought, well, okay, realistically, that doesn't sit into the Inventors Fair side. The court trials are probably the least dangerous out of the non-Kylum trials. I don't think the Dominarian Cabal I don't really want to invest into the Cabal at all. And I feel like if they're sponsoring that, I feel that's bad. That's like when you have like a bad sponsor for like for a sport or whatever, and you're like, well, I'm not going to really support that. The Amonkhet God trials, I don't think anyone fares well in it because the aim is to die by the end of it. As much as I'm still at an age where I still have an idea of like, mortality, and it still kind of freaks me a touch. So for me, I feel like that I don't think anyone does well in that, even though I do like the idea of companionship and everything. Like reading through them again, like there is a nice aspect of okay, cool, you highlight your different skills within the group, and then you help each other to get through all of them. But obviously, by the end of it, you still have to kill your best friend in one-on-one combat.
That's what I thought. Like, so I mean, unsurprisingly, so I didn't have the Cabal Pits fights in the original Twitter post that I put out, but the results from that, and I won't highlight the results for any of the others, but this one really interested me. The God Trials got 11% of the votes, which was the least out of all of them. But that still means 11% of people voted thought, yeah, I think I'd do quite well in that, in that suicidal, quasi-religious death fantasy where we all have to like live and die together, and then only one may stand. I was like, that's psychotic. That's psychotic. Right? Like, yes. The question was like, what would you do best in? Like, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so for me, like the Valor's Reach, I know we already had this. I think this was part of our hypothetical as well of who would we choose to be our companion. And rethinking about it, I still don't necessarily know who I would have as a companion. But the fact that you can, it's almost like sparring, you know, like it feels like Gladiator a little bit. Like there's no real threat of death or anything. There's a bit more of a celebratory aspect to it. It doesn't feel like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Dominarian Cabal Fit still had an aspect of you go out and you can win and you can get a cool prize like the Mirari. I mean, cool, great, amazing prize there. But I mean, the threat of being killed by Phage the Untouchable or someone like that seems like, you know, maybe probably wouldn't do so amazingly well.
Also, the Cabal Pit fights had an element of like 99% of those combatants were like slaves and people who didn't necessarily want to be there fighting for the kind of glory of the Cabal. There was only there was a short number of them that actually did it voluntarily, you know.
Yeah, so it was like gladiator, like gladiatory, like Colosseum fights, isn't it? Almost like of where you might have a chance eventually of coming into glory, but I mean, as you say, most people are under the best conditions there. So I mean, even within like not knowing what my fantasy persona would have definitively in terms of skills or what my partner would be, I feel like the kind of Valor's Reach seems like the best place to kind of flex and do well. And I think, I say, worst case scenario is you don't do very well and you're still alive and well. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Eldraine Court Trials seem fantastic, but if we look at all of the Ayara's hopes and dreams for her husband and how many of them have gone off to do the Court Trials and none of them have returned, none of the other ones seem particularly good apart from the Eventers Fair. And as I say, I don't think I could solder to a joint together properly without some significant training. So I feel like that's just off the books automatically. So,
would you not pick me to go and do the Kylum Battle Bond? You just kept saying you wouldn't know who you'd pick.
Well, I don't know if we're from the same. I mean, yeah, sure. If you want to buddy up with me, absolutely. I don't know what your skills are. We might not complement each other. You know, this has to be. It's a measured, like, right? You have to measure this. Like, we should have thought about this beforehand, buddy. Like, you know, you can't just throw that at me.
I kind of feel like we could be like a Vertus the Veiled, Gorm the Great style pairing. No.
Okay, right. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I like that.
Or
nice.
Zinder Splint and
what a coom. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. All right. Or was it a Baum? A Baum, isn't it? A Baum.
A Baum. Sorry, not a coon. Well, no. I kind of feel like the Valor's Reach one, right? I think maybe I would do best in that sort of, but also it's a bit too close to actual esports for me, and I think I wouldn't be good enough just inherently. Like, there'd always be some dude who'd put in like an extra 4,000 hours more than me into training for Valor's Reach, and I'd be like, what's the point? It's like League of Legends. There's no way I will ever play League of Legends like in any serious manner, because I just know that literally everyone else on the planet who plays League of Legends is going to be better than me just inherently. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like those hyper competitive esports. I think I would do best in the Eldraine Court Trials, if I'm honest with you.
Because there's more of an adventure aspect to it. It's more explorative. Like, you can kind of do it off your own back in your own time. You have a bit of like worldly knowledge about the world around you. So yeah, I could see. Yeah, I could see that. That seems like probably the nicest journey to take out of all of them. Like, I think.
I also just kind of think I'd be pretty good as a king.
Nice. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, I like that.
I think, you know, if King Kenrith, you know, he's only king because he did all the trials. Do you know what I mean? Like, also that's an interesting one. Is the court of Loch Thwain, is their trial to go and find? It's not to marry a Yara, is it? It's just to find.
I think it's just
to find the cauldron.
It is to find the cauldron, exactly. Yeah.
Well, then how did both Lyndon and Alginus Kenrith do it?
Because I guess Yara didn't. Well, maybe they already had maybe they were already kind of together. I can't. I mean, you read the book, right? You'll probably know the details a bit better than I do. But I can't remember if they were already kind of looking to be together beforehand. Maybe I mean, there's probably like hundreds of people that go off and do this. Like knights, probably most knights want to go off and do this, right? The court trial system. And also, I don't necessarily if they do go and complete them, do they automatically usurp Kenrith? Is it like just an automatic, like, okay, right, you're no longer king. The next person's done it. Off you go, and they just have to wait around. Also, what happens if Kenrith dies and no one else has done it?
I think the questing beast. I think the questing beast is the one that sends off like the prospects to do all 5. Do you know what I mean? I think most knights only do the 1.
I think she only wants to marry the person who finds the cauldron because she wants the eternal life thing, right? So I don't think it's necessarily she wants him to do all of the courts. Sure. Because I don't think Yara's gone off and done any of them herself anyway. Like she just happens to be queen of the Black Court. So. Yeah, that's an interesting question. We should ask. We should find out. Yara, what's your modus operandi? What was wrong with Kenrith?
Yeah, I think actually just thinking back to it, I think you're not necessarily meant to go off and do all of them unless you're chosen by the questing beast. I think that's kind of the thing. You're just meant to focus on one, generally the one where you're born, or where if you want to go and pledge.
Yeah, that seems fair because then you find yourself a position within your own court. Then at that point with some notoriety, right? Instead of just being
and I kind of feel like. I kind of feel like in the book, because it's so long since I actually read it, I think Will Kenrith, the idea was that he always wanted to go off to Castle Vantris, and kind of pledge to be part of that frat. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit like Pledge Week in like American colleges. Like,
I suppose, exactly. Yeah, you choose your own variety or whatever. Yeah, exactly. All right, so as you name it like that seems way more fun. just have like Freshers Week, and everyone's like, let's get off and do our court trials, and then like at the end of the year, they're all like heads in their books, just like crying at the essay that's due ahead of them.
I'm just reading the Planeswalkers. Literally right now, I'm reading the Planeswalkers Guide to Eldraine, and I'm just being reminded by a lot of stuff. Like Vantris isn't actually governed by Gadwick the Wizard. It says here technically the people of Vantris are ruled by the magic mirror itself.
Oh really? Okay, I knew it had like a personality, but I didn't realize it was ruled by a bit of. I guess it's like because it's like a looking mirror, isn't it? I guess it'd be kind of similar to the Disney version, where it has like it can communicate back to you. Whereas obviously, I think what's her name? Maleficent obviously had no, that's not Maleficent. Oh, what was Snow White's stepmother called? Goddamn Disney knowledge. It's always Disney knowledge that fails me. I don't know why. But yeah, I had a personality of its own. So I can understand them taking that idea and then expanding it to being, this grandiose, all-knowing artifact, which is much more interesting. I guess that means that the Great Henge might have some aspect of personality to itself as well then. I think even the Cauldron has like a kind of almost has a like choice in how it affects things, I think, right? I think
the Cauldron's like the sorting hat from Harry Potter. It's got
exactly,
it has like got some sort of consciousness,
which makes sense.
Cool. All right.
Anyway, should we go to the next one? Because we could probably talk about this for ages.
Valor's Reach. Interesting. I guess.
I think, as I say, like one that appeals to me the most is the Inventors Fair. I just think if we're talking about which one I would put, like my headcanon character would actually do well, I don't think it would do well at all. I would love, out of all of that, to go and experience the expo that is the Kaladesh Inventors Fair. I think that'd be unbelievable.
Like MCM on crack.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. That'd be really cool. But yeah, I think Valor's Reach seems like the most one you could do well in, especially considering the downside is basically, okay, you're out, so just go and spectate now and watch everyone else kind of throw at each other.
Also, I kind of want to go to the hot springs that's on the new Simic Battlebond land.
Yeah, they make it sound like a lot of fun things happen there, and I'm down for that. It has been a while since I've seen people en masse, so I wouldn't mind a big like sauna experience with all the folks.
A sauna experience, yeah. Nice sidestep of the term sauna orgy, which
Oh man, I sidestepped so many other things I was going to say. I mean, orgy is probably like the least offensive word.
I think we spoke about these cards before, and the idea that like there's always this kind of apocryphal rumor that the Olympic Village is just rife with like Earth's mightiest specimens.
Well, this is what we talked about. Like the idea of why aren't they breeding the most perfect children? Like if Urza had got there, he'd be like, "Oh yes, eugenics, beautiful. We can do it. We can create the perfect creatures."
Okay. So right, the Olympic Village is the Olympics as a whole is just a cover for eugenics.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's go with that.
That's cool. Well, it's good that some revelation comes out of this podcast. Okay. Question 2. I've tweaked this one slightly, just the kind of conceit of it, but the question is pretty much the same as when I first posted it. It's the first night out that you're allowed to go out after lockdown 20 by this point probably. Which show do you go and see, assuming that all of these places can open up? Do you go and see Huatli's Poetry Slam? Do you go see Blim's comedy special, Yisan's Liar Jam, or Judith's variety act?
Okay, so this is interesting. I think I immediately went towards Blim's comedy special, and then I remembered the bit where it says that he's likely to murder some audience members if it doesn't go perfectly right. So I was like, Judas Variety Act might not necessarily be better, but at least there's probably a little bit more going on. Yeah, I want to go for one of the Rakdos like party kind of aspects. As much as I understand, again, there's the threat of death. I mean, but this is Magic Multiverse. You can die by walking out in the street anyway. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, having read a bit of Whiteley's Poetry Slam, I'm like, okay, cool. I like spoken word events, but I mean, I don't. I mean, usually it's off the back of like a big battle or something, isn't it? And as much as I like Ixalan, I think that the Sun Empire probably my least favorite in terms of like cultures. I'm not saying that the vampire culture sounds great. It just seems like it sounds like I don't know, something I'm more
You're just not into the, like, you know, living in the jungle with dinosaurs. That's
no,
fine.
yeah, and then Yisan's Liar Jam. As much as I like the idea of, I mean, that's the thing. I think maybe music actually, yeah. And I changed my mind. I mean, it depends what's in the variety act. I do really like the idea of going to a Rakdos show of some kind because obviously it's going to be big. It's going to have a massive spectacle to it. I love all of the idea of the acrobats as much as it does have a little bit of a risque aspect. I'm okay with risque. That kind of fits into my jam a little bit, but also I'm kind of really missed music and going out, and we've said this to each other many times that we really miss going out and having a little rave, and it's been what feels like forever. So yeah, I'm pivoting into Yisan's Liar Jam because I feel like that'd be really good fun to have a nice little romp and a boogie.
I think you'd have to like animals if you went to Yisan's Liar Jam, wouldn't you?
That's also fine by me. I'm not going to out myself as a furry, but I mean that's also the sentence I just said. So.
Oh God!
Look, I've got a fox onesie. Okay, there's only so much I can pretend. So yeah,
you go onesie.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know, man. Like Blim's comedy special and Judith's variety act. Again, you're right. They're Rakdos events where it's just like, oh, you having fun? Cool. Spike through your.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want a front row seat for those things, do you? You want to be at the back, but then who knows if like if the building isn't going to be set on fire, you know?
But I kind of feel like it's one of those things. It's like any of those sort of like experiences in life where you hear that, you know, everyone gets really hurt doing it, and then inexplicably you end up doing it and you survive, and you just kind of go back again and again and again. Also, like, I mean, we kind of already have those things as well. Like, I kind of feel like, I think I said this before, that the Rakdos are kind of like the Circus of Horrors kind of aesthetic. And we do have those shows, just obviously not under pain of real death. I don't really know, like, what Judith does. Is it really ever explained, like, what she is?
I mean, a diva kind of can mean like I'm imagining it more like almost like a drag act. You know how like they have this bit where they sing a little bit. They also have a bit of back and forth cattiness. Like the venue I work at, we have drag acts to host like our bingo nights and things like that. And it feels like it'd be kind of like that, of where you'd have like almost like a little like a game show kind of aspect of where you have like some little bits of exactly. And so it has a little bit of various interactive little shows that are going on with a bit of music, a bit of drama. Maybe it has like an opening act and then a big finale at the end. I think the word diva makes it feel like it would be extravagant, you know, audience interaction kind of thing.
Well, her card is her being carried on stage by a bunch of like muscly Rakdos dudes, isn't it? So yeah, I can imagine it is very flamboyant.
I can imagine, like, you know, when people get like the circular saw and they put it towards like their crotch and like sparks fly off and people are like, oh my god, what's going on? I can imagine it being like that kind of a show, like the ones that you get in like Amsterdam, of where you're not supposed to tell people where the ping pong ball came from, you know?
Yeah. This is a very different tone of this show.
I know, right? Hey, look, I mean, you wanted something more lighthearted. This is where my lighthearted goes. This
is us letting our guard down and being like, oh yeah, you know, when we go out raving and put ping pong balls at places and
Oh god, amazing! You know, like how sometimes people do like podcasts and like people like animate little shorts of it. I want this like last 5 minutes as an animated short.
See, originally I put Whiteley's Poetry Slam because like I was part of the London poetry circuit for a couple of years before, like, you know, jobs took over and life crushes your creative soul. So like that seems like it'd be my sort of thing, right? But then you're right. If it was Whiteley's Poetry Slam, it would just be like 4-hour-long poems about how great the Sun Empire is. Maybe I think in my head when I wrote the question, it was more like she was hosting like a poetry evening. Do you know what I mean?
Okay,
so you get a lot of poets. But yeah, I think maybe I've come around to Judith's variety act, you know? Maybe. I don't want to sit through Blim's comedy act and him be really bad and me sit there being like rolling my eyes at him because he's bad, and then I get like kicked in the face with a brick made of
Mace
spikes
or something.
fire.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think also Hawatli was like known to be like the first warrior poet in like a while. Like, so I don't necessarily know if there's like she's got like a crew or a posse that have all like I think she'd probably be the only one, which is the difficult thing with that. Like, if it's all one person, the thing I like about open mic nights is that you get a variety of different people kind of going up and having different slants on it. Whereas I think if, as you say, if it is just 4 hours of the same, I think there's only so far you can go before you really. I mean, do they have beer? Like, this is the other thing is, out of all of these, realistically, Rakdos is still going to have like so they've got pubs in Dominaria, that kind of thing. So you can actually go and have a few drinks and get merry. Whereas I don't know if the Sun Empire have discovered, like even like moonshine or anything. I mean, I know they're based on the Aztecs, so they might have like access to like peyote and stuff like that. In which case, yeah, fuck it, go to the poetry slam with some peyote. That sounds like an amazing time. But you've got what are the refreshments? Might be my follow-up question, because that might make a lot of difference. Like, I'm thinking about your Sans Jam, as you said about involving all the animals, and now I'm just imagining that band Orangina advert where all of the animals get way too sexy. Like,
what are you talking about?
Do you not remember the Orangina advert that came out? That was like way too juicy, and there's loads of like giraffes and flamingos doing dancing that they definitely shouldn't. They had to take it off the air because it was a bit too suggestive.
I'm looking this up right now.
Do please, anyone else out there that hasn't seen this, go and look it up. It is not okay. It is exceptionally
sexy advert. That's
what literally, and it would definitely come up immediately. No, it was on the TV, so it's not like breasticles and everything. It's just skimpy outfits and pole dancing, which for an Orangina advert doesn't seem very.
Nathan, I'm getting very sexual things on the images search. I don't think I can search any further without being put on some sort of list.
Anyway, I was like,
furry Orangina ads. Oh, hello, this might be it. Oh my god, these were actual things.
Yeah, it actually went out onto the air. It was actually aired on the TV. Yeah.
Oh no.
I know, right? I know. I don't know how they managed to get away with it. That's ridiculous. But yeah, so I think it depends on like I think in terms of like what the act would be and what I'd be willing to go and watch and see, I think the variety act sounds like the best idea. In terms of what I personally would like to go and see now, I think I'd like to go and listen to some music. Plus, he seems like he's jamming out on that lyre pretty damn well. And I can imagine.
Yeah, the worldly tutor artwork looks pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
He's on that as well.
Yeah, good. Well, this is we've gone very far in this conversation already. The mystery question kind of brings us back down to earth again.
Oh, sure. All right, mystery question. It's very simple. Phyrexia, yes or no? Question mark.
I like that. Is that how they is that the flyer they put around to everyone when they're going through like the voting process of like, oh, we've got a campaign coming up, Phyrexia. So new Phyrexia or old Phyrexia?
I think in my head it was new Phyrexia when I wrote this. It is the religion, or rather the belief system, I suppose. Like, if you were on a plane, if you sat down in your flat or whatever now, and we're in the multiverse, like Earth's in the multiverse, and like a portal opens and a Phyrexian's been through with a bunch of leaflets going, Phyrexia, yes or no? Yeah, what's your deal?
I feel like, in terms of the new Phyrexia, like the praetors and that kind of thing, I feel like I don't like the orthodoxy idea. I feel like that's kind of one of the things that kind of makes certain groups a little bit too secty and culty. Saying that, if there was a question of do you resist or do you go along with it, I'm not going to lie, I'd probably go along with it, as much as I understand.
Oh my god!
So the alternative, like, so I know it's going to be a painful process of compilation, don't get me wrong, but the painful process of being killed by not being, because they'll just do it by force anyway. Either you do it and you commit to it, and also I want a name like fucking Thrax. I want like a name. I want a cool Phyrexian name. And I don't disagree with like say certain aspects of like say how Vorinclex is like survival of the fittest, try and push evolution to its furthest. Like, I can understand why they do what they do. I do think that obviously the Yawgmoth aspect of it was a bit dodge, but also we don't know what like the original Phyrexia was meant to be, because that big dragon planeswalker that was the heart of the 8th sphere or the 7th sphere or whatever, when Yawgmoth got ported there by Dyfed back in the day, we don't know what the original like meaning for Phyrexia was or the functionality of it. I think it was supposed to be a nice efficient machine, and obviously Yawgmoth just went there and kind of just blackened it up a little bit. So I think if it was a kind of like if it was like a conquest thing of like either join us or bad stuff's going to happen, I'm like, yeah, sure, advance. Give me some cool metal limbs. That sounds like fine.
Do you know what? This is really bad, because I was fully expecting you to go, oh no, you mental. Phyrexia is obviously like crazy. I'd be part of the resistance, because I think I would also get complicated.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, I mean, I'm glad that we both took that stance.
Yeah,
I
we
just think
were. There we
you got to
go.
be sensible. Like we haven't lived in a generation of oppression where you have to kind of go, oh, there's this big horrible bad thing that you either have to be a rebel against, even though it's a bad thing, or go with it and be part of the problem. So I think if my back was against the wall, I think I'd unfortunately probably cave. And I think, especially if it's the Phyrexians, if we have the context of the Phyrexians, I think you go, yeah, whatever, mate, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're fucked anyway, right? I mean, we haven't got Urza or a legacy weapon to kill you. I mean, I know what happened last time. Sure, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah, that's so funny. That's so funny.
Plus, or just go to Urabrask, like he's still pretty cool and fly. Like, clearly you don't have to go the whole way. You could kind of just half cut it. Just go.
So
Yeah,
you would be you'd be part of like the red circle of Phyrexians.
yeah. I think red or green. I think because
Oh,
Shoulder, I
really?
think
I'm living it up
straight.
with Elish Norn every day.
Oh,
Are you kidding me?
really?
I
Yeah,
get like
fair.
a Lady Gaga like faceplate and like
Fair, yeah, that is the appealing part of it. I don't think I'd go Jataxius because I feel like that part's a bit too sciencey, and I don't even hospitals made me a bit wiggy with the whole needle thing. And I think that Sheldred's too much duplicity.
Out of all the Phyrexians, his one looks like it would hurt the most.
Yeah, right. Like if what was Thought Scour? No, thank you. Doesn't look like
No,
fun.
thank
Taxi Probe? No, I'm all right. Thank you very much. The only one I like is the weird gritty faced guy, the super slick metallic face, and he's got like the shark teeth and things. I'm like, even he looks cool. No, thank you. I'm okay with that. With your weird like Borg like appendages. No, I think realistically, Black's obviously got a lot of betrayal and shit going on. So even if you do well, some motherfucker's going to come and try and kill you. So I feel like either you skirt the tails of Edishnorn because she's likely to conquer everything anyway, or you go I think maybe the Vorinclex route because we don't know quite enough about Urabrask to back him up. Plus, he's always like in the really hot areas, and I don't do well in heat, so I feel like I think
it'd be uncomfortable, wouldn't it? Yeah, New Phyrexia fine, but I don't want to live in the uncomfortable part of New Phyrexia.
Exactly. Look, real estate is important. You've got to figure out where you're going to go, and I feel like the Tangle seems like it'd be a decent place to be. I wouldn't mind being under the law of Glisser and Vorinclex. That seems fine.
Do you know there's a high percentage of magic characters that are elf zombies that are associated with the Phyrexians? Have you noticed that?
Oh, I suppose you actually got what's his name as well? Azuri got completed, didn't he?
You got Azuri, Claw of Progress, cool name. You got Glisser, the Traitor, cool name. And now on card form, we've got Belb, Corrupted Observer. I just thought this is kind of interesting.
I think it's interesting. Well, I mean, this is one of the things I really want to see with Phyrexia going forward is how they, because we're from a generation of Magic players that's kind of a bit past the typical normal Phyrexian invasion kind of arc, and it's a very different take on it. That was, I say, a bit more sci-fi, and as much as there is definitely sci-fi aspects to New Phyrexia, the Jataxia side specifically is very, medical mechanical kind of thing. I would like to see how they take it, how they develop, because developing away from Yorgmoth seems like it's not developing as a big bad, and it's more the differences between each faction and how they can kind of, have settle their civil disputes. And, as much as I do think eventually they'll probably try and conquer other planes, I don't think that's necessarily their modus operandum as much as it is to try and take over and have a fulfilled image of Phyrexia, So I'd be interested to see where they take it and how and who wins in the end. I do feel like Elishnor's probably going to take it, and as you say, that white porcelain effect is really striking. Does look really cool.
Yeah, what's the Phyrexian Rebirth? What's the artwork where it's the porcelain doll's face that's cracking with the fingers?
Phyrexian Unlife, the one that gives
Unlife,
you... Yeah, exactly, yeah. Where you get poison counters once you hit 0 life. Yeah, that's a bit of a freaky one, but that does still look quite cool. It's a bit doll-like, maybe. It. But I think it looks quite cool. Yeah, I like that.
I'd rather look like that than some kind of spider freak like Keskit or something,
Yeah, that's the side I don't want. I don't want extra limbs. Just make the limbs that I've got. Like Ictech looks quite cool. The Gollum splicer guy. Like I'm like, yeah, cool. Yes. He looks pretty sick. Yeah, he's got a little bit of a cyborg aspect to him. I think that'd be fine. I mean, I like how we're both justifying it as well. We're just like, yeah,
you're right.
Like, what did they do wrong? Bless them. It's not their fault.
I also sort of think I always end up in like video games or like MMORPGs, whatever. I always inevitably end up on the side of the good guys. I'll play like a Jedi in Star Wars stuff, and I'll always be like, oh no, part of the Resistance or whatever. Like I'm always like Republic over Empire in Star Wars and all this kind of thing. I just kind of feel like, actually, do you know what? Maybe I would just be better as a Phyrexian. Like, I mean, I would literally be better. They would make me better. Whereas I don't
Yeah.
think anyone else can really say that.
Well, exactly. The idea is obviously it is supposed to be better, but it's supposed to be advancement. At the moment, the current fractions, as much as they did take over Mirrodin, they don't have an immediate kind of like we're going out and conquering everything aspect. So currently, what they'll probably do is that little flyer will say all the cool things they're going to do, and then when they get into power, they won't do any of those things. They'll like all politicians do, and then go off some nonsense and start, multiverse Brexit or whatever. So maybe afterwards we'll regret our decision to go along with them. But I think that their campaign would be quite convincing.
Yeah. Hey, look at a character like Bruderclad, Telcor Engineer.
Right.
He's
What can we do?
effectively a mirror. And now but
Mm.
like under Phyrexia, they've evolved. They're no longer just these little kind of like helper robot things. Now
Mm-hmm.
they're like fully functioning engineers of their own destiny. They look cool as shit. They've got colours
Mm-hmm.
now as opposed to just being colourless. I think,
Mm-hmm.
hey, Phyrexia's not all that bad.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go on to the last one. I kind of feel like this last one might take up a bit more time as well. So this is one from one of our regular listeners who responded to our call out for suggestions of what they would like us to ask in these hypotheticals. I think when I put that post out, I didn't contextualize what kind of hypotheticals we were doing, like which Orangina advert has the sexiest animal characters. I think so. They actually gave us like a proper question, which I appreciate. So I'll let you dive in. So the question was effectively, if we were put in charge of the Magic story, MTG story, where would we take certain story threads? And some of the suggested story threads were what's going to happen with Emrakul, the Gatewatch, the Kenrith twins, or I suppose the Kenriths in general, I suppose, the extended Kenriths, or Luca, the hero turned villain planeswalker from Ikoria. I asked you to choose one because with the best will in the world, I think you would have about 4 hours worth of content for each one of these things, and I don't want to edit that. So I asked you to pick one of them. So yeah, what one did you go for, and what would you do with some of these story threads?
So this was really tough. Basically, it came down to a choice between two. I'd wanted to keep it. I think we still have done enough of the Gatewatch recently. As much as I'd be interested to see the extended Gatewatch, so like say Teferi. I know Khan's technically not a part of them, but I wouldn't mind seeing them kind of see what they're going off and doing. But I also don't think the focus should be Gatewatch stories. I mean, I know for them specifically, they're going to go off and try and sort out the Phyrexian problem that we obviously don't think is a problem. The Kenris, I think, is interesting again, but that's focusing on two characters that are still budding, like multiverse travelers. So I think that it's better to come and see them once they've had a bit more time to kind of do their own thing. Even though I wouldn't mind seeing like a progression of story for like the next like 10, 15 years of their lives and how they continue as adventurers. I feel like it's a bit typical and basic. I feel like you can do that probably better in better forms. For me, what I want to look at in Magic is kind of metaphysics. And this is why, for me, things like, say, Davriel Kane was really interesting because we started talking about entities and how those start working. And for me, that idea is really interesting. So I kind of had a little bit of a dip between Emrakul and Luca. Luca because we had that voice that spoke to him through the Ozolith that we don't necessarily know. And that kind of probably presents this idea that we're going to have some League of Doom kind of build over the next few years as kind of like group of multiverse like villains. Whereas what I think was really interesting about Emrakul is that they kind of expanded her. Because I reread the Promised End today, and it had obviously expands this idea that they're not just monstrosities that come and serve a specific function, like say Ulamog and Kozilek. One destroys, one converts, and then Emrakul mutates and builds the world into something new. And the reason why she sealed herself away in the moon is because that initial foundation work hadn't been made. Like, the Innistrad didn't have Ulamog and Kozilek kind of change the plane into a way that she and her physiology can mutate in an effective fashion. So she sealed herself away in the moon, which automatically that's already really interesting. That idea that she was able to interact with super strong magics in Tamio's Forbidden Scrolls is also really interesting because it kind of gives her a personality and an autonomy that we didn't really get too much from the other two Titans. Like, we didn't have this is my conscious decision. The fact that if you read through the Promised End in the story beforehand, this idea of everyone slowly adapting to the hive mind of Emrakul, it would have been really cool to see how that developed, to see what the intention was, why and how the blind eternities work and function, and kind of see the multiverse work outside of these planeswalkers. I know, don't get me wrong, I know Magic is a focus of planes through the eyes of planeswalkers because that's who we are. So we see how they interact, and then you also see, in your typical 1/1 cats, because obviously they're going to wander around the cityscape. But I would love to see some expansion on how the multiverse initially formed, how the the creatures within and without planes affect it, how and why entities exist, and how they interact with Eldrazi, and also things like, say, the Ur-Dragon and other entities that exist outside of planes within the Blind Eternities. That's the kind of part that I would like to explore, because we've had so much expansion of all these individual planes to give context of what can and can't exist within the multiverse. And even then, when we did our let's look at what other planes we could potentially see in the future through Plane Chase, they still haven't done any of like the obscure ones, like Equilor and things like that. We're probably going to see more basic, typical, it's just like any other planet, but it has this theme on it, because that's much easier to convey as a story and as cards and mechanics. But I would love to see an expansion of the metaphysics and the history of the multiverse and how everything works on a fantasy physical level. Like I want to see them justify the magics and everything, because the mana and understanding all of that, that's really succinct and it makes sense, using ley lines. And they've done a lot of that work recently, especially with someone like Nissa, to kind of explain how you can build another color into your repertoire, into your identity. Whereas with Emrakul, we only just started to get some personality for it, and then she did an amazing thing of locking herself away. And I'd love to see kind of what her intention is, what would have happened had we seen the full transition of Ulamog into Kozilek into Emrakul, and see how that would have affected a plane. Because again, the only other thing we've seen Ulamog come and basically consume a plane from the outside in, as in from the Blind Eternities outside. And I think it was Sorin and Ugin and everything. They saw basically kind of form out of nowhere and consume the whole thing. I'd like to see that interaction between, like, say, Eldrazi and entities, and kind of understand how planes and the multiverse works that way.
Cool. Excellent. That's pretty comprehensive. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of, in terms of like, I want to see all that kind of stuff as well. I think it's very important to kind of branch out with your storytelling. I mean, any storytelling will probably be good at this point. I think that's why I enjoyed so much of the direction they were going in with the Zendikar online fiction, because although they did falter to, or fall back rather to just talking about the Planeswalkers and like it's always Nissa and Jace and Nahiri, they did allow to have some of the side story, and they did allow some of the main stories to really flesh out the characters that weren't necessarily just the Planeswalkers gallivanting around the place, and like explore some of the deeper issues with the individual planes. I want to see more of Luca. Like I know he was a bit of a problematic character for some people, because I think a lot of people took his characterization both in the novel and in some of the kind of story bits that came with the cards, although they followed very different tracks, as we've already discussed. Like, he was the kind of embodiment of this kind of idea of like a toxic masculinity, where he, just the pig-headedness of him, the sort of self-righteousness through like aggression and action as opposed to empathy, and the idea of like a lot of repressed emotions, or emotions that should be worked out but instead come back through like force. Like throughout the book of Son of Bond, you don't ever doubt that Luca, loves the people he loves, or cares about his team, or loves his city, or is devoted to the people of the city. And these are all very positive, empathetic things. It's just when those things are challenged, or when he needs to kind of buckle from his own sort of worldview, he can't do it. And instead of, sitting and listening to what people are telling him and allowing himself to like healthily work through his emotions of loss and all these kinds of things and new experience, he reacts in an aggressive, like totalitarian, militaristic way, which, and even more tragically, he was never not going to do that, because he is definitely the product of his environment and his kind of upbringing within the militaristic like society of Draneth. So that whole kind of idea, now that he's off Ikoria and he's gallivanting around the multiverse with this, new power of his to control the beasts and the monsters of different planes, while still having this completely like, pressure cooker brain and soul, of emotions and sort of, loss. I think that to me is more interesting than just like, oh, I'm a villain with a cape, who's going, ha ha ha, I like killing things, I'm a warlord, And also I kind of feel like, because his world isn't lost, it's changed. It's not like it was destroyed, like how Nahiri like thinks essentially that Zendikar has been destroyed and like remade, or like how Innistrad was destroyed and is now being remade. His world was never physically broken. Its worldview changed and its politics changed with the kind of acceptance of bonders into Draneth and all that kind of thing. So it's a very different sort of loss for him, because it's effectively only a loss in his mind, whereas with a lot of other people's it's a much more catastrophic, like physical, oh, the world I knew doesn't exist anymore, like fucking literally. So I think for him it's a much more pertinent thing to like the world that we're in now. Like that's why that's why politics is so polarizing nowadays, because there's no evidence for one way or another. You can't say to someone, no, I'm right, because that literally isn't, like, my home country doesn't exist anymore, because that's not how things work anymore. It just doesn't exist in that person's brain and that person's worldview. So I want to explore Luca more. I think it'd be cool to see him interacting with different planes and different planeswalkers. Like, I know that's the kind of tired trope, but I sort of think like he's a character and he's a force in Magic, which I don't think other characters have really found before, because it's it just seems a little bit more darker and maybe a little bit more close to home of like real world politics and kind of like societal norms. I don't know. I do want to explore Luca a bit further. I think if I was allowed to sort of like take a storyline somewhere, I would like him to go to a plane and just instantly take over like a city or something, and see him kind of devolve into further madness. Like he's trying to recreate Draneth like in his own image, but because he simultaneously likes and or simultaneously hates and controls monsters, he can't get away from the fact that he is a bonder. Like, what would that look like? He would try to recreate a city that he's lost in his brain, but the only way he can do that is by using the very monsters that have infected his city and his worldview. Yeah.
Yeah, the development of a villain is really cool. Like, I think it's a shame that we only saw him right at the turning point. It's almost like, how we saw when we got the Obnixilis story, and the final line was, that was the first world to fall, and it was the first of many. And then that's all that was where his story finished, because obviously we see him then years and years and years later when he's already Obnixilis the Fallen, and he's already become demonized, he's already stuck on Zendikar. We don't see, I mean, that is technically a journey into villainy, but he was already a warlord anyway. Whereas with Luca, we see him get influenced by this disjointed voice, which is also a very interesting part of that character development anyway. And as you say,
we sort of find out who was in the Uzlith. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I think a lot of people think it was probably Oko, because he's a trickster and he's obviously a manipulator, and he's more likely to start this idea of building a group together that can influence and change other planes. And I can imagine Luca, for example, going to say Ixalan and then kind of taking over like the Sun Empire. I imagine if he goes over and takes control of like Zakama and Galta and big monsters like that, I can understand that being like a very easy thing for a lot of different planeswalkers who we've already seen to oppress. And we don't really get to see the development of evil as much as we get to see the resolute definition of good. Like when we see like people like say Gideon getting over their own personal trauma, eventually becoming the leaders of armies and resistances, and eventually sacrificing themselves for the greater good. We see that a lot in Magic because it's quite palatable. Whereas I think it's quite interesting to see, as you say, the flaws in characters and see how they develop and how they're exploited and manipulated. And I think ultimately Luca isn't necessarily his development into like a negative personality traits wasn't autonomous. It wasn't his decision. He was almost influenced and pushed. And it's interesting to see how far that will then, and how he can justify it in his own mind and kind of give a bit of an insight into that. I think, that's a really cool idea. I think we've seen enough development of good arcs where it'd be nice to see a nice development of a character that is, as you say, very easily disagreed with, but you can kind of see and understand the faults in his psychology and how and why he makes those decisions, and probably just is going to have that voice on the shoulder that's going to push him, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I think because that's one of the things I really liked about the Zendikar storylines when it came to Nahiri, is that we were effectively following the villain of the piece for most of the story, whilst also dipping in with Jason and Nissa, because a lot of stories just don't really want to just focus on the villain, essentially. But there was always this air with Nahiri. Again, I think it's influenced because she's a fan favorite, and people let her bullshit go way too much. Is that she kind of fills more of a grey anti-hero role, where it's like, oh, we can see what you're saying about what you're doing, so I guess it's justifiable, and like, you're not wrong, like inverted commas, just maybe you're not seeing it from the perspective that you need to.
There's justification, even though Emrakul can't really be justified. There is an aspect of understanding in there. Exactly.
So I think Nahiri still fills that role, and I think there's still a lot of room for Nahiri to come back as more of a hero in different stories from different perspectives. Whereas I think Luca is all in, and that's why I think a lot of people, found Luca's character to be quite so toxic, because
Mm.
everything about him is cut and dry, black and white. And the tragedy of it is that because that's his worldview, everything is black and white, when the reality of his situation, which is very complicated and isn't black and white at all, and is, there's nuance that surrounds him at every corner, and he needs to embrace the nuances of his new existence, and he can't. I think there's room there to do some really quite heavy, quite dark stuff with Luca, which, isn't pantomime villain, and it's not anti-hero kind of copping out. It is, he is a villain, he needs to change, but it's a tragedy because it's not his fault, but it couldn't be avoided. But he is a villain, so he needs to be treated as one. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation when you think about, like, say, Nahiri, Luca, and let's say, for argument's sake, Tybalt are like your three demographics. So you've got true pantomime evil, you've got just as we've said, like justified anti-hero, and then you've got kind of developing villain that's been pushed by, say, power and influence, and it's kind of pushed his mindset and it's broken his his humanistic qualities, and they're all red characters. This idea that they are all impulsive, like, again, not rage, because it's not about anger, it's about your drive and about the fact you're willing to commit to a thought. Exactly. And passion isn't necessarily always good. And it's funny that a lot of the black characters we've seen recently can kind of skirt the sidelines because they at least understand both sides of it, but that selfishness of them is what makes them that nihilistic, egotistical kind of quote unquote villain. Like, obviously people like Ob Nixilis fulfill that same pantomime role that, say, Tybalt does, but there's obviously a difference. And it is interesting when you think about those three characters, they are all red, and a lot of villains these days we're kind of moving away from black, because we've been saying this for ages, that we're kind of annoyed that black seems to always get like the typical cliche villain character, and they don't really develop outside of it. Whereas now we're looking at, say, a varied selection of villain tropes across red that you can, as you say, develop. And it is specifically because he has that point of view, and that was what got pushed when he took on all the energy from the Ozolith. That's what broke his mind, was that I think this, I feel this is what I think and feel, and I'm not wrong. And that's actually way more dangerous than someone who measures and goes, yeah, I've considered both things, but I'm going to do what's right for me. Because that can actually be reasoned with, whereas Luca's point of view probably can't be.
Yeah, black is self-aware. And also selfishness is such a subjective thing, really, because selfishness, if I say you're being selfish, you can turn around to me and go, no, I'm just doing what's right for me. And I'm like, yes, because that's selfish. Like, there's such a push and pull there. Like, someone's selfish act might actually be beneficial to someone else of a third party. We don't know. There's a whole bunch of implications. And it's just...
Well, it's like selflessness can sometimes be very egotistical. Like the episode of Friends where Joey's trying to find a good deed that isn't selfish. Or so he's telling Phoebe there is no non-selfish good deed. And in the end, she tries to think she succeeded. And it's like, but does that make you feel good? She's like, yeah. I was like, well, then it's a little bit selfish. So I guess exactly. In the inverse is very true as well.
Yeah, 100%. Whereas, red is all about passion, and sometimes that can lead you down some very, very dark roads. See, we've done it again, mate. We tried to have a silly episode, and now we've gone into like really deep.
I was going to say, I hope people have stuck through to now, because we got through some. We chatted some shit earlier in the episode, and we've actually kind of settled onto some decent discourse, because it is an interesting thing, and especially from a magic story point of view. We spent so many years doing the arcs that were your typical fantasy arcs, and now we're starting to get a bit of nuance into the stories. It's interesting that we've got characters that are fallible, that are supposed to be good, and then characters that aren't necessarily good, but you can find redeeming features in. And obviously a diversity across psychology is really important within magic anyway, because it creates a nice, intelligent, engaging story, even if you only get it in dribs and drabs. If you don't get a full, you don't get like full trilogy novels like we did with seeing, like, say, Urza and like the Urza saga, and getting to understand like the bits and pieces of how a grand scheming protagonist is always going to have some negative effects, because his decisions are always going to affect someone negatively. We don't get that now. We still get little bits of diversity in the characters that we're giving and how we're supposed to understand them. Like the conquistadors for the vampires, for example. Is it necessarily bad to go through conquest? Because that's exactly how the world that we live in developed. Like, is that necessarily a bad thing? Yes, of course it is. But then you can start to understand the bits and pieces that make it good. Like pirates throughout history aren't these, let's go and drink some rum and have a good time kind of thing. Like they're like plundering and pillaging is not a good thing, but that comes across fine. And it's interesting now that we, as you say, get a little bit of nuance with characters like Luca, where they can see someone where their understanding of the world is pushed when it's no longer a single world they have to understand and relate to. It's now an entire multiverse that they now have influence to and will be influenced by.
100%. Oh, blimey. Well, I think we're going to stop it there before we get even more serious than we already did. Oh, Christ. I love it. This game is just so good, isn't it? It's just
it's crazy that obviously just a little like two creatures attacking each other can create conversations like this. You know? It's very good. Very cool. I mean, it's nice to also see they do give us like some diversity. As I say, like I think that's some of the thing that Magic players are now kind of, a lot of people are getting to an age of where they can take stories that aren't just simple. You know, like I think people didn't like the Gatewatch specifically because it was your typical paint by numbers Avengers kind of thing, especially when we were inundated with a very cool multiverse that was being built in the Marvel franchise anyway. I feel like it did feel like Magic was kind of cheating a little bit and riding the coattails of it, whereas now we can kind of fledge and spread. So yeah, I'm interested 100%. To see if they do, and I think they will. I think that very much like Lookov was set up to be something that's going on in the future. They don't just drop a random voice in his head that we don't get an explanation of. I mean, they might do, actually. I'm just talking and I'm thinking that's exactly what wizards could do.
That's exactly what they would do.
Yeah, that's exactly what they do. But I mean, hopefully they don't.
Who the fuck is the fucking Raven Man, Nathan?
Don't. That's really annoying.
Mate, they capped off the Chainveil storyline in like a paragraph in a book no one fucking read.
Yeah. Niv's just got it sat in a room somewhere. No worries.
All right, look, guys, if you are listening and you have any answers to some of the hypotheticals that we've spoken about today, then honestly, you're about several months late because all of these questions were on our Twitter, posted out weeks and weeks and weeks ago. So where were you then? I need to stop having a go at people.
Yeah, every time. It's like, I love you guys. Okay, I mean, Andy might be trying to beat you over the head with a stick, but I'm here with a carrot, having a little nibble with you. Don't worry.
If you want to post any hypothetical questions, guys, or if you do want to have any of the answers to some of the questions that you heard from the show today, you can find our Twitter at mtflavouring. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is?
At The Fox in the Moon.
We have a YouTube channel where we do videos of like little lore bits, cracker packs, interview episodes. We recently reposted our interview with Cthulhu Cards, the 3D card ultraist extraordinaire, where we did the video version of the interview that we did with him a few weeks ago, where we included not just still images, but also video footage, very kindly taken by Cthulhu to show off some of their great 3D card ultraing work. So please go and check that out, show it all the love. It's a fantastic interview with a very, very talented ultraist, so you should check it out. Other than that, guys, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.